Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who video where today I'm giving you my more in-depth, detailed review of this week's episode, Survivors of the Flux. So yes, thank you for joining me again for another video. I hope you enjoyed my initial thoughts on the episode last night. If not, you can still check that out. But I'm probably going to cover some of the same ground, but hopefully add a little bit more flesh to the bone than having watched it once, you know, just a short time after I'd first watched it, and very much just initial thoughts. Whereas today I really want to kind of break this episode down a little bit more, work out what really worked about this episode and what didn't, where it leaves us for the finale for the series, and just a much more in-depth look at the episode as a whole. Thank you for you guys' comments on the video yesterday. It was always great to hear your thoughts and theories on it. Again, if you haven't already, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this episode. Please do put down in the comments what you thought of Survivors of the Flux. What are your predictions for next week's episode, The Vanquishers? I just love to hear your thoughts and your theories for what's to come. And before I just get into the video proper, I must just say there's going to be lots of videos coming up this week. I'm planning for at least daily videos, if not multiple videos a day, right the way through to The Vanquishers and beyond that into the next week as well, for all the fallout from whatever happens in next week's finale. I just want to, this is really the place to be if you want to get all the latest news and updates and on what's going on with the show, what's happened so far in the series, what to expect from the finale, plus a few other things. Of course, the soundtrack for Survivors of the Flux will be out very soon as well. So yeah, just there's lots to check out, particularly if you're new here. Remember to hit that subscribe button as well, and the like button, of course, on this video. But now that's all the plugs, all the boring stuff to get out of the way. Sorry my background's really, really boring. I know it is, but hopefully I'll put some pictures up or something to try and jazz this video up a little bit more. But yes, Survivors of the Flux. Obviously, at the end of the previous episode, Village of the Angels, we were left with the Doctor becoming a weeping angel, and Yaz and Dan and Professor Jericho's trapped in 1901. That was kind of fundamentally the cliffhanger we were left on. And, well, Chris, it's slightly annoying. Not annoys me, but I felt it was slightly a shame how quickly the Weeping Angel thing was just kind of resolved, and that was it. Like, it was basically, she spent about 15 seconds as a Weeping Angel, at least on screen, and then that was it. She was back to normal. Broken out of that, it's explained that it was just a means of transport to get her sort of out of the universe, basically, for the Weeping Angel to be able to transport her out of the universe to turn up on at Division, which is where Tecteun's sort of base is, which is outside of the universes, and so, like, I don't know, I don't think Chris is really that good at resolving cliffhangers. Like, he's really good at setting up some great ones. You had the end of the universe in episode 1, you had a Weeping Angel taking over the TARDIS at the end of episode 3. There's been some good stuff in there in terms of the actual cliffhangers, but I just feel like the resolutions in general have been kind of cheap and easy and simple, and just I don't know, I just don't always love the way Chris seems to go about resolving cliffhangers. It's certainly different to Stephen, in that Stephen Moffat tended to kind of just start his resolution in a completely different point to where the episode ended previously. That was sort of his classic thing, whereas RTD was a little bit more straightforward in resolving cliffhangers and picking up from where they were. And I think Chris is more of that vein, but just doesn't always find the best way to resolve them. Although I will say he is great at coming up with a good cliffhanger. So yes, first I wanted to talk a bit about the Yaz and Dan and Professor Jericho plotline, which is reasonably interesting and, takes us to there's a lot of the Chibnall tropes of his era of Doctor Who, big establishing shots of different countries with a massive timestamp over the top, 1904 Mexico and whatever, the Great Wall of China and these different places. And it's just classic Chibnall. I don't think it's particularly bad. It's just very much a trope of his version of Doctor Who. But yeah, we see obviously these three characters sort of teaming up and seemingly going on a mission to find out when the world, the universe is supposedly going to end. I guess the Doctor's message is kind of setting them off on this course, but it all feels a bit like it's not really leading anywhere or really makes any logical sense. There's just it feels like there's a few remnants of like a first draft left in this, because there's the weird, in the earlier parts of their scenes, there's this weird plot line of somebody trying to stop them, somebody trying to attack them. When they're on the ship, you have this chap come in who tries to basically kill them all, and seems to have a tattoo of the Grand Serpent, so he's presumably linked to him in some way. But there isn't any explanation, and obviously we'll see them trying to get blown up as well before they get on the ship. So there's 2 attempts to try and kill them early in the episode, but that doesn't go anywhere. There's no explanation as to who is chasing after them or why. And I don't know, it just seems a bit kind of bizarre. Like, maybe it will be explained in the next episode. Maybe, it was part of the Grand Serpent's plan, whatever the heck his plan is. I don't know, but it just I found it slightly odd, particularly watching it back when you just realise, oh wait, yeah, that thing happened early in the episode. There was that dude trying to knock them all out, and yet there's nothing. There's no explanation. There's no connection. There's nothing at all in there. So I just thought that was a little bit weird. And then there's also the slight plot holes of what happened to the little girl who was with Dan, Yaz, and Professor Jericho at the end of episode 4, Village of the Angels. Like, she turns into Mrs. Hayward or something, whatever her name was, the old lady, at the end of in that episode. But how the heck did she get there? Did they just leave her to her own devices there? Or, I just felt they could have just had a throwaway line to explain what happened to her. Like, that's all it needed, really. So I don't know why they didn't bother doing that. And then just again, slight, jumps of logic. This whole, they meet this wacky chap who says, find the dog, or, get the dog. And so they think, oh, let's go to the Great Wall of China in 1904 and paint a message on the floor that Carvanista in 2021 is going to see from his spaceship. But then he can't time travel, so he can't actually come and do anything about it. And how the heck does that message stay there over 117 years? Why do they go all the way to China to do it? Like, it's just... I don't hate any of this. Like, I enjoyed this episode. I fundamentally did, but I just think some of these little things are slightly laughable. Like, why does that make any logical sense? I mean, if you can, explain it. Explain it to me in the comments, but I do not get why they thought that contacting Carvanista was going to do anything, how the heck that message stays there for 100 plus years, why they went to China, and then just what the point of it was, because then Carvanista instantly sees it, how the heck does he see it, and then says, oh, I can't do anything about it because I can't time travel. Well, great, that's really solved all our problems. Like, what it felt like it wasn't really going anywhere, and it kept kind of feeling like we were going to get somewhere, and then it's like, oh, well, there's nothing. It was like, oh, is someone trying to kill them? Let's forget about it. Oh, let's contact Carvanista. Oh, he can't do anything. And then, oh, let's meet Williamson. And okay, they drag him into the tunnels, which you kind of expected, and I guess it gives us some form of explanation. It does this mysterious set of sort of doors or portals to other worlds and places and stuff. Does at least explain the fact that Dan met him in his timeline in some way, and the fact that Yaz met him on the Temple of Atropos. That at least explains those things. It explains why he's out of time. That gives all some sense and semblance to that. But I didn't understand why these portals are there. Why are they in the tunnels in 1904? Is it just because the whole universe is in flux and is all a mess, and so it's making time mess up, and that's why they've ended up there? And Williamson just kind of got caught in the middle of it all, and he's a bit of a madman, so it kind of played into having him be that character. I don't know. That's kind of the best explanation I can give so far, but I don't really feel like we fully understand any of this. And sure, a lot of it, I'm sure, will be explained in the next episode. This is kind of like your part 1 of the finale to an extent, but is also part 5 of obviously the longer narrative. And so I can very much understand it's a lot of answering questions and asking questions, solving bits and opening up bits to be resolved in the next episode. So I shouldn't expect all the answers yet, but there's just a few, slight jumps of logic and things that didn't quite make 100% sense to me. In terms of performances, I fundamentally really enjoyed the dynamic of having Yaz, Dan, and Jericho together. They were a really fun combination. There were a few little jokes and gags thrown in there. That was that nutty man on top of the cliff. He was great fun. Chibnall seems surprisingly good at just writing these ridiculous, funny nonsense characters. I don't find it cringy. I just find it quite funny, really. Yeah, it made me laugh. I thought that was quite a good moment. But it was nice to see a bit more of Yaz sort of taking the lead, really. She's almost trying to take on the doctorly role because you've got the new companion in Dan and the even newer companion in Jericho, as it were. So Yaz is kind of put in that position of trying to emulate the Doctor. And it's just nice, that little scene we get with her seeing the projection that the Doctor had recorded for her, or the sort of hologram she'd recorded for her. And just deepening that relationship a little bit there and showing that somehow I don't think that's a platonic relationship going on there. You know what I mean? Like, as much as they kind of try to hint at it, but also never actually go explicitly with it. Surely there's more to it with Yaz and 13 than meets the eye, shall we say? Even if there's nothing's happened yet, surely there's more than just a friendship going on there. You have to think. But something I did read from somebody yesterday, and I really agreed with, which I think is a real shame, is that Dan is our companion. It's supposedly his companion. We're in episode 5, and he has no connection to the Doctor basically whatsoever. He spent 3-4 minutes of screen time with the Doctor, barely even had conversations with her, and yet we're meant to kind of just accept him as a companion. I guess to an extent that is just the kind of where that's fallen through because of the nature of the way the series is, the fact that they have to all get split up quite a lot to kind of expand the narratives and go to different places and whatnot. I get that, but I just think it's a shame that they didn't have more time to be able to establish Dan as a companion alongside the Doctor, because they just have so little of a screen time to create a connection, a relationship, some chemistry. That just isn't there because we've never seen them together. I'm hopeful if Dan does stick around for the specials, which I'm pretty sure he's going to, that we might see a little bit more exploration of that than we've seen so far. But he just doesn't feel, an integrated companion in the way that we've seen in previous series of Doctor Who. And I know that a lot of that is just the nature of the story they're telling this year. But I do feel like it could be a benefit to give us just a little bit more of that in the finale and hopefully the specials as well. So that kind of wraps up that plot line, which leaves us with them all trapped in the tunnels underneath Liverpool in 1904, I believe. And then the Sontaran turn up. Well, I'll come to that in a minute. So yes, the other kind of bigger plot that isn't the Doctor plot, which I'll come to in a minute, is the plot all around Unit and the Grand Serpent. Of course, it's great to see Unit back in Doctor Who again. It's been a while, and it's so much fun as a fan to see all this stuff of the history of Unit almost going through it. You've got a reference to the war machines in there. You've got a line of dialogue from the Brigadier and Terror of the Autons. It's great stuff. I love seeing it. Seeing the old original Unit building and the sign on the outside and everything, like, that stuff is great. It's so much fun. I don't quite understand what the Grand Serpent's kind of point, his plan is. Like, is he just wanting to work with the Sontarans to take over the world? I don't think we got really much more of a motivation than that. Like, I love him as a villain. Craig Parkinson is a brilliant actor. He plays a villain brilliantly. We've seen it in Line of Duty before with Doc Cotton, and I love seeing him in this story. He's just so perfectly evil and villainous, and in such a suave way. He almost reminds you, a sort of classic Master, Roger Delgado Master sort of vibes to his character at times, I find, and it's just so brilliantly effective, that sort of evil portrayal of it. And yeah, just seeing him being able to infiltrate Unit through different periods of time is a really clever idea. I really like that. And I know people were talking about, does it mess up the continuity or whatever? Firstly, Unit dating is a complete disaster. So if you have any concerns about the date that, supposedly Unit was set up in 1967 or whatever, okay, sure, it wasn't, we don't know. None of the dates of anything to do with Unit make any sense whatsoever. I think that, one of the Joe Grant stories she says implies is set in like the 60s or something, and then there's another story implying that it's set in the 70s. It's a mess. So don't, if that's your criticism, that the dates are wrong on Unit and on the creation of Unit, and therefore that invalidates the story, ruins the canon, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense. Dating is a mess as it is. And I liked, when I thought about it more the second time round, the explanation of the Grand Serpent presumably having a time machine or some way of travelling through time means, because I saw people commenting, wouldn't the Brigadier have met him at some point while he was working there and all that? And I'm like, well, possibly. But the Grand Serpent seemingly just jumps through time to the critical points to be able to infiltrate Unit and kind of shape it in the way he wants to ultimately take over control. That's why he doesn't age. Well, maybe it's because he's from a race that doesn't age. I don't know. But certainly the implication is that he doesn't stick it out for very long. He might have done it all in a few days, jumping from 58 to 67 to 87 to 2017. Like, he's just jumping around time to try and infiltrate and get stuff done. He doesn't care about sticking around all the time. He's changing the dates on things and, changing documents and stuff to kind of erase him from history in many places. So I feel like that all ties up and makes sense, and is why we shouldn't expect to see the Grand Serpent meeting the Brigadier or the Third Doctor back in the Unit days from the 1970s. Like, that still works. That still makes sense. Sure, like the Doctor's the 13th Doctor's TARDIS being in Unit in 1967, that's a little bit interesting. I'm sure that can be explained away by saying, the Grand Serpent, hid it away or something, or it just happened to be in a place that the Doctor at the time didn't know about. Obviously, he really wanted a TARDIS, and there is his future TARDIS sitting right there in Unit. But, that stuff I can kind of overlook just for the fun of all those scenes that we had. And then, of course, towards the end of the episode, we get Kate Stewart introduced back into the story. It was slightly a shame we didn't get more of her after she was teased in the trailer. I don't know why she was. Like, I feel like it would have been such an even better moment with the shock and surprise of, it's Kate, she's back, brilliant, that would have built up to it through seeing Unit through the years. So it's kind of a shame that happened, but I also like that, Kate can see through the Grand Serpent. She knows he's evil, he's an alien, and wants to try and do something about it, although also doesn't do anything about it, just goes home, gets her home blown up, and then disappears, and leaves the Grand Serpent in charge to come and, infiltrate and take over the Earth or whatever. I don't know. I didn't think that was brilliant, but I enjoyed seeing Kate again at the very least, and I'm sure she's going to have a much bigger role in the finale. And then that leads us to the end of the episode there from that point of view, which is the Sontarans turn up slightly randomly. For whatever reason, the Grand Serpent has teamed up with the Sontarans to take over and destroy the Earth. It's not quite explained why the Lipari shields have all been taken down. I guess the Sontarans are able to do that or something by a forced attack at them or something, and are able to break through. Also, it seems that the Sontarans are attacking them at different periods of time. Well, either that, or they came through a portal from the present day to the past where we meet Yaz and Dan and co. Or like we saw in War of the Sontarans, they can actually also time travel. The Sontarans can time travel and infiltrate at different times in history. Maybe that's what they're doing. I don't know. I think a lot of that's going to be explored in the finale. I was in many ways quite surprised they decided to throw that aspect into the finale. It's suddenly not just become about the Flux and the Division and the Doctor. It's suddenly also now a saving the Earth from alien invasion storyline that we often would get. The Sontarans are basically the big bad of the finale, like the Daleks or the Cybermen used to be, which is quite cool. I feel like it's great to see the Sontarans finally get their moment alongside the Grand Serpent in this case, rather than a master Cybermen story that we've seen 5 times for a finale or whatever. But also, I just feel like it's throwing almost too much into the mix, and I'm not quite sure how that's all going to be played out in the finale. And I just hope that kind of the Grand Serpent has more interesting motives than just I wanted to cause chaos or I wanted to rule the Earth or something. Like, I hope there's something a little bit more interesting in there to it than that, because he seems like such a cool, fun and interesting villain. He's a great character, but I just want his motivations to be that little bit more interesting than the baseline I wanted to take over the world thing. And presumably he's got to have one more coming across with Vinder at some point as well. I'm not quite sure how that's going to tie in, because obviously to come on to the sort of one of the other narratives of the episode, we saw Vinder turn up on the planet that Swarm and Azure are on. I don't really know quite what that was meant to be, where Swarm and Azure are absorbing people to create the time force to be able to get out of the universe and onto where Division is. Technobabble, don't really know quite what it all means, but it's fine. And then Vinder kind of just wanders around, sees a passenger, sees Swarm, gets sucked into Passenger, and that's his episode. He meets Diane as well. Oh yeah, Diane's still there. Yeah, forgot about that. Like, she was in episode 1. You must remember her, and she was in a bit of episode 3 as well. Diane, remember her? She's going to be in the finale. I don't know. It just felt a little bit like kind of just trying to remind us that these characters still exist in this episode. Like, they really weren't the focus, and it was just about saying, oh yeah, Vinder, he's still here. He still has a plot on it about Belle and stuff, and he's also connected to the Doctor. And also there's this character called Diane as well, and she's interested in Dan and the Doctor and all that. Like, it just, I don't know, it didn't feel like there was a lot to it, really, with their appearances in this episode were purely just to keep them ticking over until the finale. And as I say, I feel like the only logical sort of narrative conclusion would be for Vinder to come across the Grand Serpent again. Maybe in the course of trying to get Belle, he has to, overcome the Grand Serpent or something. Like, otherwise it would make no sense for the conflict we saw between them in episode 3, Once Upon a Time. The backstory of Vinder being ruined by the Grand Serpent for not following his orders. Surely we've got to see that narrative conclusion in the finale of the two of them meeting again and Vinder presumably overcoming the Grand Serpent or something. But I just don't see how him being in Passenger on this random planet, well, I guess with Swarm and Azure, how the heck does that play into them on Earth? But then Diane's going to presumably come back to Earth to meet Dan or something. So I guess that's going to all... Yeah, there's a lot of, like, hanging plot points that are surely going to be drawn together in the finale. I just don't really know how yet. So I realised we're like 18, 19 minutes into this review, and I haven't even mentioned the Doctor, which tells you that, A, there was a lot else going on in this story, as well as the Doctor stuff. But I guess, well, we should talk about it now, shouldn't we, really? The Doctor and Tecteun, the Division, it's all time for explanation time with Chris Chibnall. I didn't think it was that bad. Like, I think the thing is, this episode, Survivors of the Flux, is an episode that is part of a larger narrative, Doctor Who Flux. And yes, I think if you watch Survivors of the Flux on its own... Oh, sorry for hitting the mic there, guys. If you're watching Survivors of the Flux on its own, devoid of the narrative of the rest of the series, sure, it's not that exciting. It's a bit, heavy on the exposition. It's a bit lacking in action. It's, it's just an episode of fan servicey Doctor Who with lots of references and stuff. But within the context, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing for the show, necessarily. Like, I have a whole kind of war in my mind about what Doctor Who should be, what's good for the show, whatever that means. But I feel like that as part of the ongoing narrative, this episode was very necessary to be able to set up things and get us to the finale. Like, we needed to start getting some explanations as to what Division is and what's going on with it and who this mysterious woman is. what actually caused the flux, what is the flux all about, and all these things. And finally we get some of those explanations in a way that I think works pretty effectively. Like the performances of both Jodie Whittaker and Barbara Flynn, who plays Tecteun, are fabulous. They play off each other so brilliantly. I thought the direction also was really effective on that really, really cool looking set where Division is based, where she's based. I thought that those scenes, as much as a lot of it is just Tecteun explaining things to the audience and to the Doctor, and the Doctor going, "Oh, of course, that makes sense," and "Oh, I've just figured this thing out," and like, yeah, I guess it can become a bit tiring, but it also, as an audience, we just needed those answers, because that's the way the mysteries and the narratives of the series so far had been built up to. That we needed that explanation that the Division has been set up by the Time Lords back in the day, but now it's a bit bigger than that, and it's got operatives, and now it's reached that point where it's controlling all of time and space, basically, that they're hiding in the shadows, influencing everything that's going on with all these different planets that don't really know how to set themselves up properly, and the Division are there all the time, kind of shaping things. Like, I think that's a really cool idea, personally. I know some people haven't been so on board with it, said it's a bit boring or it's a bit obvious and generic. Like, I think, yeah, based on the initial explanations that we got in The Timeless Children, you could kind of work out what Division was going to be. And I think that's fine. Like, Stephen Moffat used to do that all the time. He used to do the old obvious, he'd set up a mystery, and then the answer was the most obvious thing all along. Obviously, Missy was going to be the master, and things like that I think I don't think it's a bad thing for the show to have a mystery that you can work out and solve by putting the pieces together that are there. And so we got that explanation of Division. Then we obviously get the explanation that this woman is Tecteun. We get the confirmation that the Timeless Children was all true. The Doctor was actually the Timeless Child, was found at this wormhole. The Master wasn't lying about it, which I felt was Chris Chibnall saying to all those fans who were like, "Oh, I really hope it's just the Master lying," and they retcon it and whatever. I feel like it's almost him just going, "Sorry guys, this is the facts, this is the truth, you just got to deal with it," which I'm on board with. Thanks, Chris, for doing it. And then obviously giving us a lot more explanation for the reason behind the flux, basically saying that the flux was created by Division, which was, I guess you could kind of reach that logical conclusion. It would make the most sense given Division was becoming a big thing alongside Flux. Surely they're going to be quite sort of intertwined. So the fact that one, the Division made Flux makes sense. The fact they did it to stop the Doctor, or to kind of stop the Doctor's influence, because she was, causing them to have hope to rise up against presumably the Division's desire to kind of, push them down, control them subtly, so they could never become too big for their boots, because Division is this ultimate organisation that's kind of even bigger than the Time Lords, really. Initially it was just a Time Lord thing, but now it's been outside the universe, and it's bigger than just Time Lords and stuff. It's controlling the whole universe that we're in. Like, I think that's a really interesting concept, and that the fact that they then need to create the flux, just basically wipe out half the universe to stop the Doctor from interfering. I don't mind that. I think that works. I think it makes sense. I think it always had to tie back into the Doctor in some form, given the whole setup of her as the Timeless Child, the fact we've been keeps on talking about Division and all this stuff. It could never be nothing to do with the Doctor. I don't think that would have made narrative sense, that it was just a thing that happened that she had to try and deal with. But that and just seeing that dynamic between Tecteun and the Doctor, I thought it just really sold it. It just really worked very well, I thought. And then, of course, we get introduced to the multiverse in Doctor Who for the first time. Well, I'm pretty sure the first time it's kind of properly been explicitly explained. Sure, you had parallel universes. We think Pete's World from Series 2 and the likes. And Inferno, I guess, as well, is also a parallel universe. But the idea of this universe being one of a wider set of universes within a wider sort of space, I guess, it gives a lot more scope to the show in many ways, because it basically lays out that 58 years of adventures have all happened in Universe 1, this little ball we've got here of a universe which has got planets and galaxies and whatever inside it. But actually there's another universe over here and here and here, and so on and so forth, and creates a much, much bigger world for Doctor Who to play in many ways. That there's all these different universes out there that we can find narratively, we can find ways to jump between them if we want to, and could give a real extra scope to the show, which I feel like, as much as a lot of people have criticised what Chris has done with the show, in the most part, a lot of the things he's done has actually just expanded and given more opportunity to the programme, added more mystery to the programme. We've added so much more lore and backstory to the Doctor's character that isn't explained, but we know is there, so can then be explored more in the future if someone so desires to do it. And now we're making the Doctor universe bigger than it's ever been before, because it's not just one universe, there's an infinite number. It doesn't explain how many there are. And I again think that's a really cool theory. And just seeing that shot of the sort of Division ship, whatever you want to call it, placed that was stuck in between these two universes, one was orange, one was blue, I thought that was a really, really cool shot, and just emphasizing that idea of being out of any universe. We're like in the void, basically. Now, where that's going to go for next week, I'm really, really intrigued. One thing I saw, a cracking thing I saw on a forum yesterday, was someone explaining about the Doctor Who logo. I don't know if you guys have seen on social media, but the Doctor Who logo over the last few weeks has been gradually changing colour from its original orange. It's gone through a sort of yellowy colours to greens, and now we're getting towards blues. Now, that's very interesting, because in that shot I just described of the two universes, our universe, the universe on the left, was orange, and the universe on the right was blue. So could it be that the logo was actually hinting at all the time was us moving from one universe to another, and that actually the ultimate resolution of the series is going to be moving into this new universe, Universe 2, or whatever you want to call it? And, you know, maybe the remnants of what's left of the universe from Universe 1 are going to be transported into Universe 2, kind of what the Division were aiming to do. And that's how we're going to set up and start off the sort of new narrative of Doctor Who in many ways, basing it in a new universe, because this old universe is finished, as Tectoon is so desperate to make us aware of. So, I don't know, I just thought that was a really, really interesting point, and maybe could suggest that actually that's where the show is going, that we're going to end up setting up Doctor Who in a whole new universe. Sure, I'm certain that is going to be exceptionally controversial. Will it be as controversial as The Timeless Child? Who knows? But I know that's going to cause a lot of drama in the fandom, because these things always do. You know, if some of our favourite characters don't get transferred over, are we now in a universe without the likes of, you know, Sarah Jane or Rose or all our favourite companions and characters? Are they suddenly no longer there? I don't know, but I'm sure Chris isn't an idiot, and he's not going to write it all completely wrong. So let's have some faith in him, I think. And so the conclusion of the episode, from the Doctor's storyline, we see Swarm and Azure turning up on this on Division at their sort of headquarters, as it were. Let's call it Division HQ, because it's the best way to describe it. They turn up at Division HQ. They've managed to escape the universe, basically, and get into the portal between the void between universes, which is already taking a monumental amount of power. That was the whole Time Force stuff that was growing that we saw earlier on from them absorbing all these people. That's enabled them to kind of traverse the laws of time and space to be able to escape the universe, get onto Division HQ. Then, for not really any reason as far as I'm concerned, they kill off Tecteun. Like, I think that was a real shame. I don't think that really was the right decision by Chris. Hopefully it'll all be validated in the next episode, but I didn't like that. It just felt such a waste to throw away such an important character to the Doctor's history, to what's now become to the show now. And, you know, they could have had a much better sort of redemptive arc around that character, of her maybe becoming, you know, Tecteun sacrificing herself for the Doctor ultimately after realising the mistakes and all that. That could have been what played out in the finale. But instead, we just cheaply got rid of her, almost just to show the threat of Swarm and Azure. But we've already seen that through the series. I didn't think that needed to be re-established. And yeah, sure, the cliffhanger is him. He's about to touch the Doctor. Obviously, he's not going to kill the Doctor in that moment, because that it's not the end of Doctor Who. So it's another one of these really good cliffhangers from Chris, but you know will be stopped in pretty quickly. Either somebody will turn up, she'll jump out of the way, there'll be a big eruption or explosion or some way that stops it actually happening. So I don't know, I just felt like it was a bit of a waste that Tecteun was killed off there. And of course, the one big thing lingering that I should have mentioned earlier on, but I haven't, is the fob watch we see that's got all of the Doctor's past memories in it. Clearly that's in some form going to be opened in the finale, because we see it being opened and then shooting into a sort of time vortex-y Gallifreyan symbols type thing. Now, obviously, the Doctor can't get... I don't see how the Doctor can get all of her memories back and have all that explanation and fit that all into an episode and for it to make any narrative sense. Like, if we get that all thrown into the Doctor's mind, then suddenly there's just a lot of stuff we don't know about the Doctor, but the Doctor now does know, so it doesn't add any more interest to us. So I don't see how that would make any sense. Like, I almost see it more like she might get a glimpse into it, but then actually has to use whatever that has, that power or something, to defeat Swarm and Azure in some sci-fi way. You know, she'll have to lose those memories, except she's lost those memories forever, to be able to save the universe and defeat Swarm and Azure, or something along those lines. I love the fact that we're using the fob watch idea again, and we've got that there as that sort of, you know, golden thing the Doctor wants. But ultimately, I don't see how she can actually take it for it to give the narrative conclusion that you want. But then I also look at it as, if she doesn't take it, and, you know, she doesn't end up getting those memories back, can she ever just go back to accepting it and being normal when she struggled on this path for such a long time of not being able to accept that she doesn't know half her life? In this episode, we see so many, you know, theories between the Doctor and Tecteun put out of the Doctor, this timeless child was left by the wormhole. Has she just come through it? Was she about to go through it? Was she just left by her parents just there for a minute and Tecteun came and nabbed her? or what? It was almost reminded me a little bit of Hellbent, when the Doctor and me are talking to each other about what the hybrid is, and you know they're giving us all these different theories, all these different possibilities, and then leave the audience to basically decide what the answer is, or you know, or could say it's all of them or whatever. And I almost felt like there's a similar idea here in Survivors of the Flux, where you know Tecteun and the Doctor are saying, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could have been this, but we'll never know. And so it's kind of leaving the audience to make up their own minds on what they think the Doctor's backstory is, because it clearly would completely defeat the point of what Chris Chibnall is doing if he then goes and explains everything about the Doctor's backstory, because the whole idea of the Timeless Child was to give more mystery to the Doctor, add some of that backstory we didn't know back into it, to give just more of a mystery, become Doctor Who that much more, which I think is great. But then if you go and explain it all, then it just takes us back to where we were before and makes the whole arc completely pointless. So I'm fascinated to see where the rest of this series goes, where the Vanquishers takes us. We've obviously got Sontarans taking over the Earth. We've got units in some form run by Kate trying to, you know, bring them back. My sneaky little prediction is, wouldn't Graham and Ryan turn up at this point? Surely if all this has happened, they'd be looking for the Doctor and end up stumbling across someone like Kate Stewart. I just think it'd be fun if Graham and Ryan turned up again. They probably won't, but that's just my thought. We've got the Greats, the Grand Serpent, also in league with them, trying to take over the Earth or something. You've got Vinder and Di stuck in Passenger. You've got Carvanista and Bell, they're also trapped, about to be shot by Sontarans in their ship because there's no shield anymore. So that leaves them in a pretty dire straits. Then you've got Tecteun just being killed and Swarm and Azir about to kill the Doctor. How the heck is she going to get out of this in 59 minutes? And well, that'll be my another video this week, of course. We'll be theorising exactly what's going to happen next week in this episode. Though, as I've said before, my biggest concern is how the heck Chris Chibnall is going to wrap this up in 59 minutes. I'm sure not 100% of things will be resolved in this episode, in the episode next week, because it doesn't need to be. There's 3 more specials to continue exploring things. Clearly the problems with the TARDIS is nothing to do with Flux. Actually, it's going to expand into whatever the special is, because we've seen the picture for New Year's Day, the New Year's Day special, that sort of implies that there's some problems with the TARDIS. But I just think that as much as the fundamental Flux problem will surely be resolved, let's hope it's not just a reboot the universe button. I don't know, we'll see. But I do think some of the narratives will continue further through the specials to come. But yeah, guys, it's my longest review of the series so far, because there's just a lot to say about this episode. I think really there's a lot to dive into and try and, you know, break down and understand. And it's fun when there is a lot in there. I'm not quite sure what I feel about this episode. Like, I think it was quite an important and necessary episode in that sense, but I don't know if it's something I'd go and rewatch individually, like say I would with War of the Sontarans and probably Village of the Angels, this series as well. Like, it's clearly a part of the bigger, longer narrative of the series, and that's the function it serves. It serves to give us some answer to some questions, but also not give away everything, and just fundamentally set up a lot of what we're going to see in the finale. And I think that's fine, because that's often what we see from the you know, part 1 of a 2-part finale anyway. So I don't see why that's any different when we're talking about a 6-part story when we're in the penultimate episode of the series. But guys, please, as I said earlier, give me some thoughts in the comments below of what you thought of this episode and your theories on how this story is going to be resolved in the final episode of Doctor Who Flux next week. But apart from that, guys, please hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I will see you again very soon for a brand new video. But until then, it's goodbye.